Hello and thanks very much for joining us on What's the Point? What's the Point is a brand new political podcast set up here in our very own North Lanarkshire from three very, what would you say, highly intelligent, questionable individuals.
Maybe stretching the truth there,
I was going to say it was a bit optimistic. Anyway, what's the point? What's the point of this podcast, David? We started this with an idea, and the idea was to educate the people of North Lanarkshire on current rumblings and what's happening and decisions being made within not only just the local authority but the Scottish Government, Westminster. We wanted to look at things in the broad, and we wanted to sit around a table, have a chat and see what nonsense.
And a bit of fun.
Of course.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. It's crucial that we've got something like this, because just now there's so many issues that people, especially in North Lanarkshire and beyond, just don't understand potentially, or unless you're involved in council whatsoever. So although we're sitting here as residents and we're all born and bred in North Lanarkshire and all have, sort of vested interest in making it as much as good as possible, I think the issues we've got to discuss have got to be the real issues, the issues that people are really concerned about. So I think it's great. We've got the project off the ground. Can't wait. Other than Brennan's shirt, I think I think we're probably in for some intelligent chat.
Don't worry about that. We'll get a photo. We'll cut to just now, David.
There must be an edit suite.
Sticks and stones, gentlemen. Sticks and stones.
Jenny, you want to say a few words?
I think we've spoken about this for the last few weeks about getting it off the ground. I think whenever I'm out speaking to members of the public about what we do as councillors and trying to help them understand your role, it's so evident that members of the public generally don't understand what we do. They don't understand the different layers of government. They don't understand the difference between local government, national government at Holyrood and Westminster, and the various roles that the MPs, MSPs and councillors play. So a light-hearted bi-weekly journey through the world of politics in North Lanarkshire, in Scotland, the UK and possibly beyond, I think is well overdue. And I think we'll be able, using our experience and knowledge of the local communities, to put that across in a way that's easier understood, I think.
I think you're right. Terminology is a huge thing. Absolutely huge, and people understanding what's going on. And I think some of the terminology that's used in our sphere in terms of the civic centre and even some of the committee papers and stuff that we'll read, they're designed potentially that be very difficult to understand. And let's be honest, we can come on to that in another day. But however,
funnily enough, North Lanarkshire Council and others within the political sphere have a policy of plain speaking. So I'm sure local people out there that access these papers and watch these committees may disagree in relation to that plain speaking approach.
Do you know, you did some Vox Pocs.
I did.
This week, which was really interesting because it kind of shone a light on the levels of knowledge that people have. And I think we're going to come on to some of these topics as we go on today, but the topic around funding and debt and the impact that debt and potentially spending decisions that were made decades and decades ago before we were ever elected come back to haunt. And I think we're going to cover that.
Yeah, we'll cover all that kind of stuff. But I might as well just put it out there right now. This is a disclaimer. We are not acting for political gain. We will be completely and utterly unbiased in our opinion, whether right or wrong. Yes. But again, the position is our opinion. I think that we are best placed to pass opinion, because not only we're local residents, we're also a wee bit kind of on the inside as well in relation to how local government works, how Westminster works, how Scottish Government works. And I think it will be an unusual concept for many, because really we'll be honing in on local matters as opposed to national matters.
Greg, if it stimulates conversation with people out there and gets them thinking about the issues and how we've arrived at some of the decisions and stuff, then that's what the job's done, irrespective of what political party or rosette you happen to be wearing in your lapel. It makes no difference, because the people in North Lanarkshire, I believe, don't care.
Yes.
They really don't care.
Why do you think other political parties or political groups haven't done something similar? I'm surprised at that, given that the technology
It's quite simple.
is fairly simple. No, it need to be for us to set up, but now that it is set up, I'm driving over this morning and I'm thinking, why are we the first to do this?
I think there's a couple of things in that, and if you want me to unpack it and unpick it at the moment, quickly, very, very quickly, it is not in the party's interest to be so forthcoming with information, and I think that's an indictment on all political parties, because as you are aware, and we're all aware, perhaps those at home and those listening to this podcast aren't aware, there is a whip system, and within that whip system, elected members are whipped to vote certain ways. They've got to adhere to whatever the mantra of the party is that week. And we've lost something in politics, in my opinion. We've lost the old sort of viewpoint where, rightly or wrongly, that individual will stand on his moral compass and put forward a case for whatever it may be. So we've lost that. And I think that, again, having an opportunity, a podcast, but also individuals like myself, where we are prepared to stand up for what we take, for talking's sake, a recent example which is quite funny and leads me in nicely into my next sort of segue here. The last full council, Jerry. If we unpack that and we take a wee look at last full council, I thought it was extremely unusual that we ended up in a position where elected members in a chamber were being told, and this is all available in a publicly broadcasted webcast, that only 2 elected members in that chamber asked questions about the process of that. I think that was you and I. Now, you highlighted a couple of points in that, Jerry. Go to explain to us what your point was.
So my point was that the monitoring officer in North Lanarkshire Council made a declaration from the chamber floor that the footage of the full council was going to be withheld from members of the public.
What's that role, just for people as well, because obviously we've got this phraseology and stuff, but what is monitoring officer?
So the monitoring officer is the chief paid legal officer of the council, so he advises the council on all matters legal. Yeah. And as far as councillors are concerned, for you and I, a liaison point between the Ethical Standards Commission and trainer on the councillors' code of conduct, the things that councillors can and do say and the way they behave and all of that. So that's the role. So at the full council on Thursday, monitoring officer makes a declaration that because of the election on the 4th of July, the footage of the meeting was going to be withheld. Now, that didn't go to a vote. Members didn't make a decision on that. That seemed to me to be a unilateral decision by the monitoring officer without any regard to the 77 members who were going to be in there. And I wanted to understand why members of the public were allowed into the gallery and they were going to be able to digest everything that was said. Yeah. Well, and there was some difficult topics discussed at that council on Thursday. School transport and the decisions around that being one of them. And it was challenging, more so because there's candidates in that chamber who are standing as candidates in this election coming up. So it was potentially going to be really difficult for them. But the decision to withhold that video footage, I thought, should have gone to the floor, to the members, to make that decision if that was going to be done.
Oh, wholeheartedly. And it's like, I think the one point that got me about that one, I don't know whether you remember, is that we actually had some councillors in there cheering. I'd never seen that before, actually cheering at the prospect that this information wasn't going to be released.
That was when the announcement was made that we're postponing the webcast for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden there was a Labour cheer. Yeah. My goodness. Have you ever known anything like this before? How does the process normally work? Explain that a wee bit.
Difficult for me to say because I'm only elected last May, so it's every day's a school day.
But in your time, have you ever known that?
I've never known it to be the case. I mean, certainly we've brought motions forward to council to make sure that closed meetings Because there's closed meetings that take place that members of the public won't get to see. And I'm unhappy for some of the justification given for withholding those papers from the public. And I've asked questions around it to some of the chief, well, not the chief, I'll say chief officer and the deputy chief executive. And I've been wholly dissatisfied with the responses that come back. Nonetheless, the decisions went forward anyway, whether I liked it or not.
I think that's an entire programme in itself. Really, if we look at motions, etc.
Motions, there's the overall accountability aspect to our local government, and you've got to look at, and that's from all the way from the top right down, as to what, who's accountable for what and what part of the process, and what can be public related and what is public excluded, and the public, I think, have a right to see much more information.
All the blood and snotters, Dave, that goes along with it. I mean, generally speaking, it's the Local Government Act 1973, and there's a section of it. I'm not going to go into the line by line, but there's a section in that which states the reasons why it can be held back from the public, and generally it's around the terms of a contract to be undertaken, or the terms of a sale or disposal of land or stuff like that. So that's fine, provided that agenda item has those elements in it. Then you can justifiably say, right, this falls under that legal criterion, and it should then go for a vote on it. But what if it doesn't? If it doesn't, then it shouldn't be there. And my query is, who makes the decisions to put these markings on agenda items? Because I believe that the last thing that a local government should be doing is withholding information from members of the public about where their public pound goes. And you, myself, and the other 74 councillors have a responsibility to be the scrutiny body of the council and protector of the public pound.
It's an interesting point, because do you, David, given now that you were elected recently as well, right, and this is your first term, it's coming into my second term, to answer the question, if it's been known in the past to happen like that, and a webcast used to be pulled for 2 weeks until after an election, in my time I've never seen it, never ever seen it. It's the first that I have ever seen it, hence why I asked the questions. Do you think, looking at your chamber, looking at your colleagues, etc., do you think half of them know what that process would be? Do you think that, and this isn't me being unfair?
No, it's not been unfair, you're right, because I think one of the things that's come across in a couple of years that I've been elected is the whip system that we talk about. And again, some people, we band that about in media, talk about it all the time, but basically to me a whip system is almost like a quash in democracy, because it ultimately in this situation ends up with maybe 3 or 4 people from the larger political parties, shall we say, deciding and then coercing or persuading or just downright instructing their members to vote. And what that does is discourage any kind of question. So what you've got in there is a whole list, a whole raft of people within the political parties no longer questioning decisions, no longer questioning committee papers, no longer thinking for themselves, when they have the ability to do that. So to me, the public perception when I came into this was that councillors would be there to represent them. And I know everybody says that glibly, but that should be about assessing stuff. It should be, as Jerry said, about scrutinising documents. It should be about supporting good ideas. But it should also be about holding people to account, when things are not right and things don't seem correct. So, there's a whole raft in there that I don't think that the full talent in North Lanarkshire has been heard. I really don't. And that's across all political groups.
I think we've kind of lost something. I think we've lost something. I think that there's certain colleagues in that chamber that we know, and they were vehemently opposed. We're going to come on to school transport. But basically there was a number of their colleagues vehemently opposed to that, but they allowed themselves to be whipped in that process. The consequences are significant, no doubt. Now once I say us, there'll be consequences for us, because in effect it's like the magician's secrets So really, and what the point of the whip system, especially on those individuals where their moral compass is being challenged, they know it's the right thing. Do we think we're seeing enough local representation within the party structure? Do we think that now we've came for a party structure ourselves, we conform to the whip? A few times I certainly challenged that whip. But again, the position is.
Well, I'm going to suggest that I didn't stay in that long enough to be whipped enough, because I couldn't do it. I mean, it quickly came to me that I was never going to be comfortable being instructed to vote for issues that didn't sit well with my conscience, that might be damaging to members of the public in my constituency and beyond.
You know, when we were SNP councillors, obviously, that's there. So even when we sat in group meetings, that was there, and the thing that got me was that, you know, a hot topic would come up that was coming to full councillor or committee meeting, and basically you got to ask 1 or 2 questions to make your point within that group, and that's if you were lucky. And it always astounded me that at that point, I think there was 29 or 30, I can't remember the specific numbers, but there was only like 4 or 5 people ever asked questions. You know, and it's like, and you could turn up to some of these committee meetings and full council meetings, and quite honestly, you'd be thinking, who are these councillors? Because they neither had a presence or a voice. And that system's wrong. You know, people in North Lanarkshire need to understand that if they want something for their councillor, they should be on their backs. You know, and we're going to come on to something, Greg, actually, because you mentioned about council there and you mentioned about school transport. I think that last week for me was a huge issue, absolutely huge issue. And I go back to that point that you kind of get involved because you want to be the local voice. And just now I'm not convinced that we are or are allowed to be the local voice that's there. So what you had last Thursday was people in an organised manner, in an organised group, putting forward the parents group, putting forward some wonderful, absolutely wonderful rationale behind why they've got concerns that's there. And the one thing that really stuck in my throat was a police presence. Now, you're kind of laughing, but you think, that's now the 3rd or 4th time since I've been elected.
When I laugh with a certain unease.
Absolutely.
David, I laugh with a certain unease. The first time that I have ever seen such frequency in relation to a police presence. And it's staggering to think that individuals within our authority are paying their council tax, that is their civic property, and they are being refused the democratic right to protest within it. But again, in playing devil's advocate and unbiased.
We need to be careful in that. I mean, but they're allowed to protest.
Yes.
Right. Nobody's stopping them protesting, right? But I think in any environment, when you see agents of the state, whether it's the police in uniform or the army, God forbid, ever get into civic centre, you automatically feel uncomfortable. That you need to be careful about what you do.
So what's the point
and what you say.
What is the point in somebody instructing police officers that arguably their time is better spent out doing something in the streets or investigating crime, but we've got a minimum of 2 police officers in attendance for a council meeting that can sometimes last 3, 4, 5 hours?
I suppose the argument back will be some of the issues that have happened down south where elected members have been fatally injured. But listen, I don't think we're at that level.
I don't think we're at that
level either, but I also think as well in relation to political discourse, individuals have got the right to be in that public gallery. I think that people, that is their civic centre. And the idea for me, and rightly or wrongly, is I have never seen such a police presence until this council term. This is the first time. So in the last 5 years previously, I've been an elected member within North Lanarkshire. I've never seen, never once.
Why?
I honestly don't know. I don't know whether it's a case of the public appetite in relation to the administration and its decisions, whether it's officers who feel intimidated. I have absolutely no idea. But if you take the sort of position in this, that there should be open dialogue with the electorate, in my opinion, rightly or wrongly, and criticism and scrutiny is quite rightly so going to come from individuals who are paying their council tax. And really, in effect, I have seen no evidence of any physical threat. I've not seen anything other than people raising disdain at decisions being made. Now, again, I'm being trying to be very unbiased.
There's, I mean, people's sensitivities are all at a different level. I get that.
That's the key word, sensitivity.
I absolutely get that people see different things from different events or different occasions is there. But you have a group of 77 councillors who have put themselves forward in public life.
Yep.
You have a group of officers that normally attend these meetings as well, who have mostly a public profile that's there as well. And you think that you maybe need a rhino skin, at times to be part of that job. But you have to be able to take some of that. And I can't pull together the levels of sensitivity sometimes on the basis to the roles that we undertake. So we took it on roles. We look at officers within that council that run the council effectively and make some hard decisions. I absolutely get that. But by the very nature of that, there's going to be criticism. And if you can't take that level of criticism, or even just question him at times.
Well, in fairness, I'm going to interject because we don't know the background. We don't know if sensitive emails have been sent or things like that. We don't know. There could be a whole plethora of things that could have happened for that police presence to be there. My thing is it's become more frequent.
It is without question.
That's concerning.
One of the things that troubled me a wee bit about the footage that, despite the monitoring officer telling us was not going to be available until after the 4th of July.
It was the U-turn.
Lo and behold.
The U-turn.
So nobody knows who.
Did you decide that?
I never made it. Nobody asked me. But anyway, the footage is there for all to see. But the volume goes down. Right, and I think this is important as well because members of the public are absolutely entitled to be in the gallery, right? Because it's their local government. The webcast is there to capture the discourse that is ongoing, the dialogue between, members of the council talking about issues, bringing forward motions, amendments, all of that kind of stuff. And the public made their voices known as they were leaving, right? And some of the commentary from the public was worth hearing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was blocked out.
100%.
Yep.
That was blocked out. And I don't know why that was blocked out. Because personally, I want to hear what the public have got to say.
Yeah.
Members of the public want to hear what other members who are attending the chamber have got to say as well, and they were denied.
I'm going to share a wee story, if you don't mind. That's there, because many years ago there was I was involved in community council before I became a councillor, and there was a really, really contentious issue in the local area, and we fought that, and it then moved itself to a full committee and public attendance at the gallery. So you as you know, you sit upstairs. Above the council chamber.
Popcorn.
What's that?
We get popcorn.
The popcorn, and you can sit there. And the gentleman that was asked to leave, and I think there was a lady also on Thursday. And can I say, if you're ever watching this, well done. Thanks very much for making the points that you did manage to get across. Because at some point in the past, I was that soldier, and I was escorted for the chamber. I was escorted from the gallery for doing exactly the same as these folks had done there, because the contentious issue that we were raising was ignored. And that's exactly what happened with school transport, and it was ignored by the administration at that point, and local residents' feelings were just not heard. And the only way that could be heard, and I can fully appreciate the people in that gallery, because they felt that the only way that they could be heard was to actually stand up and shout at a public meeting. So one power to them, but the other side is back to that police presence. Why would we have police officers asking members of the public to leave a civic building for doing nothing other than making comment?
Peaceful comment, constructive comment, valid comment.
Well, that leads us nicely into the segue of speaking about school transport then. So obviously we can cut to a wee clip on this just to highlight a couple of key points.
Is that the SNP have one policy when they are in administration and a conflicting policy statement when they are in opposition. To me, this is indulging in shameless politics. If this motion were to be passed today, I would expect when Councillor Carricker sums up, she fully explains where the revised £3 million required to continue with current school transport arrangements will come from. We all know, everyone in the Chamber knows, is to come from the education budget. As such, do we now consider reducing the number of teachers in our schools, as Glasgow SNP Council proposed to do in the next school year with a cut of 175 teachers? What would this mean? What this would mean is there would be less teachers in primary schools, resulting in more composite classes, less teachers in secondary schools, resulting in restricted subject choices for many pupils, which then would generate extreme negative feedback from pupils, teachers and parents. Another option might be to consider reducing the funding to our AN schools at a time when the number of ASM pupils has significantly increased, which will result in parental concerns regarding the level of education and support in schools for their children. Another option might be cutting back on non-teaching staff, including pupil support, curriculum and support staff, or to reduce cleaning and janitorial staff. All of these would be extremely challenging to introduce and undoubtedly would be detrimental to the learning and teaching opportunities for all pupils, which this Council is fully committed to.
Within the full council meeting, we noted that the leader of the administration highlighted that the council's budget could not afford that additional, is it £3 million, I think it was, something in the region of 3 million, three something. But in his explanation, and he's summing up when he's in his explanation when he's presenting his motion, he highlights that if we were to remove that £3 million from that budget and put in school transport, we would have to remove something else in its place. And I think the point was made in the chamber.
He said, as I understood it, that it had to come from somewhere else in the education budget.
The bit that I found staggering was teacher numbers. Yes. We're going to have to slash teacher numbers. Yes. Be very scared, Jerry, be very scared. In addition to that, not only was the teacher numbers good enough, we're going to have to take it away from ASN schools.
Oh, be afraid. Be more afraid. Because we're going to scaremonger against the most vulnerable families. Yes.
And then it continued on that road. Now, I think that we have to really set the record straight here. I think it's our obligation and duty to set that record straight. Do we fix budgets based on a like-for-like basis? So if we're going to put something back, do we have to cut from somewhere else?
So, you want to know about the budget process?
I think if you can make that very simplistic for folk.
And that's going to be hard for you, Jerry, because I've heard you speak on this.
I'm going to do my legal base.
I'll go and make an hour coffee.
Probably prior to Christmas, you sit down with officers of the council, and the officers of the council present you with a document that has already been filled in by council officers with a suite of... It's a menu of cuts that you can make over the various different areas of business, whether it's the Chief Executive's office, education, children and families, active and creative communities, which is your community centres and stuff like that. So they've got a list of all the services. They've got a list of the different options, whether you're going to cut it entirely by 10%, 20%. It'll give you the budget amount that you'll save over the first year or year 1, 2 or 3, and then you've got the number of jobs that it might impact on. So you get that at the beginning of the year. Councillors don't sit there and think about what they're going to cut. Yeah. They just go in there and go, I'm going to cut that, I'm going to cut that, I'm going to cut that, I'm going to cut that.
Well, you see that, Jerry, can I just jump in, because I know we're staying out the kind of political group stuff, but to my knowledge we were the only political group that actually engaged with, and we called it the People's Budget, and we actually set up individual meetings to try and gauge. So you're talking about making menus and decisions and stuff that's there. Is that we actually tried to involve something different. It was something different. Okay, there was a limited response, we accept that, but it was crucial. So sorry, I cut across that. Yeah.
So the Section 95 officer, who's the Chief Financial Officer at the council, will effectively instruct us and tell us what the deficit is, if there is a deficit. Okay, now councillors and officers are bound to deliver a balanced budget. We're legally bound to deliver a balanced budget. So if we have a deficit of £7 million, we need to find £7 million of savings from that suite that the officers have produced. And that's it. I mean, it's no more.
So we're not replacing like for like.
No, you could choose, if you choose, Greg, to make your £7 million from the Chief Executive's office. You could do that.
So your press and marketing, we could potentially take it for that.
You could do that. If you chose to completely take every penny that's paid into the active and creative communities, you could shut all the swimming pools, you could shut all the libraries, shut the 39 communities.
I think that's it. I think this is a debate in itself. This is another episode.
That's how you do it, and you do that until you get down to a certain level, and then you can look at what your income is going to be from council tax to see if that can offset some of that, and you can delay cuts as well.
School transport, gents, was completely unusual because all of a sudden we had this additional funds, which when I raised the point, we've been presented with an additional £8 million. Absolutely. The leader of the council was very quick to point out that this was due to very good management of the CEO and financial management of the CEO and officers. Sorry, I apologise, I'll retract that. So it was the very good management of officers to produce that saving. Now, again, that's not been presented by £8 million. In normal circumstance, my viewpoint has always been that the whole basis of good governance is being able to change your mind when new information or new things happen, that you can come back around the table, sit there and change your mind on that point.
That's a James O'Brien statement. Why have a mind if you're not prepared to change it?
This is critical. So when information like that, but by the way, we've just funded this £8 million, in my opinion, in the back of the sofa. And we brought it back.
Big sofa.
Big sofa. So again, would we be in a position where that would not be right for us to bring school transport back and other critical decisions where cuts being made to look at that?
I think mid-year, if we came across budget savings that produce an additional, we'll just say £8 million over the year, it's a substantial amount of money, right? My take on that would be that you should have all 77 councillors sit in that chamber and re-examine the options available to have a mini budget, if you like,
that was
through the year,
to Mr. Crichton's contribution
in order to have true democracy.
It's a point that I raised on Thursday's meeting that was there, because effectively it was watching the two leaders supposedly of the supposed opposition party and the administration party, and I asked a direct question to both of them. I never got an answer obviously to either, but one of them was the basis, and it was to all councillors as much as to the leaders, was that they were presented with the option of having a mini budget discussion and meeting with all 77 councillors to discuss this, and we're calling it the £8 million that's there, as to how that could be best spent, and with a specific aspect of looking at school transport. And how many people did we get replying to us? How many councillors actually replied to the invitation to come to a mini budget discussion?
Well, I'm going to hazard a guess and say zero.
There was none.
No appetite from
no appetite from any of the political parties other than...
Surely, if we had an opportunity a few weeks ago to present that idea, a mini budget, surely that would have meant that a simpler process. It would have saved a whole lot of time and energy in putting forward a motion to say, look, we want to overturn this decision of school transport.
We could have looked at other options, Greg. We could have looked at other options. That there could have been low-lying fruit within that potentially could have been looked at too, and weren't, because we denied ourselves the opportunity. The opportunity to do that.
I think that the only thing that got me effectively last week as well was this reference that was made within chamber about the subject becoming a political football.
Well, that's the point that I was coming on to make. So So if we're ending up in a situation where we've got a contentious issue, and school transport's a perfect example of that. We obviously backed the motion, so we're in support. We're in support. I'm a previous user of that service as well, and I think it does an absolutely phenomenal sort of job in the authority, considering that we have...
Yeah, they even had buses when I went to school.
Unsafe walking routes, and we've also got a number of buses, although kids get transcards, etc. for the Scottish Government now.
Yeah.
These bus services are so infrequent sometimes that it impacts everyday education. So I think that us providing that service is still a critical part. I want to make the point on political football, because I think that is important. Yeah. Do we think that the decision not to back a mini budget could have potentially seen political scope or manoeuvring in that to try and push that forward? I put an email out on the day of full council, and I highlighted that point. Yep. That I think that if you'd have took the mini budget a couple of weeks ago, then we wouldn't be in this position.
I know, but this is where it gets. This is where it gets so depressing, right? Yeah. And this is where things become more political than it is about the issue at hand, right? So the issue at hand here is about making sure that there's safe routes for kids to walk to school, and if they can't, that there's adequate bus provision to get them safely there and back across the year. By not taking advantage of a mini budget and denying yourself the ability to debate the options available to you as a member of the council, you've got to ask the reason why that would be. Could that be because Dave or Greg, that you brought that forward and that wasn't brought forward by one of the main opposition parties, so they just say, no, we're not going to go for that. We'll just ignore that and pretend that it never happened, and we'll bring a motion to council and we'll ask everybody to go for that. So it's like you're ignoring potentially the better option to have the full discussion, the full debate, the full mini budget in favour of a motion at council, which, when you look at it and when you look at the numbers across the chamber, it can't win. Yeah. It can't win.
It's more the democratic thing for me though, Jerry, because the people in North Lanarkshire once the elections are passed, all they want is someone in there representing them. Yeah. And I said before, they don't care really what colour or rosette you've got once you're in that position. But what they do expect, and what they're entitled to, is people working together to try and get a solution for their concerns. The school transport thing is a real concern. I don't think by any stretch that it's gone away. That's there, and power to the groups and the parents that are continuing to fight for the kids that's there. So this aspect of political posturing or political football or whatever else that's there, again, the residents of North Lanarkshire need to understand what kind of control, if you like, the individual councillors have over that, and it's very limited. But the perception, I think, is different. I think residents have a perception that that their voices are being heard, and they should be heard a lot stronger than what they are just now.
So much to unpack in relation to everything to do with politics in North Lanarkshire. And I think that, again, we will come on to this, because obviously, as I said, again, we now have this as a scheduled thing. We'll be sitting here discussing that. I think we come on to the process of council and numerical numbers and all this kind of stuff at that place more often. However, I'm still want to kind of hone in on school transport. There was obviously shouts for the gallery in relation to certain elected members and individuals, and do we think that I'm trying to carefully put this. Do we think that the Labour group, I'm very vigilant, I could be sued. The Labour group that sits and represents within that chamber, are they coming across with the messaging that they're trying, that it's the Scottish Government, we're in this position because of the deficit, the budget, etc., 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 when year on year, and this is, I can go straight right back to 2017, every single year it was the worst budget. Every single year, Chicken Little, the sky is falling, oh no, oh no, oh no. But we end up in a position every single year where money becomes available or something happens and that deficit is reduced year on year. Now, you made a critical point, but I'm going to come on to that in a second, but I'm just interested about your view on Labour. Are they representing those in the gallery? Are they listening anymore?
I don't know if it's that they're not listening. I think, and this is my own personal perspective, I think they come to the chamber and they have to hold a line that's maybe not their own, right? Because they're part of the Labour Party, right? So the Labour Party operate across Great Britain. They can't deviate really from the lines that they use elsewhere.
But are they controlled? Because this is an interesting point that I think they're like.
No, hear me out a wee minute. Hear me
Are
out.
they controlled by a national party? Is the national party telling that group, this is a way you should be managing that council?
Here's how, right? Here's what I've identified over the last wee while, right? There's absolute duplicity in the Labour Party, right? The Labour Party is the devolved government of Wales.
Yep.
And in Wales, they cry that, in fact, Wes Streeting, Shadow Health Secretary, Labour Party, very prominent politician down south, he made the comment a few weeks ago, and Scottish Labour were going mad about it because the line that they take is it's all about the Scottish Government. They won't give us money, they centralise everything, they get more than enough from Westminster through the block grant and Barnett consequentials. They've got more than enough money, right? In Scotland. But in Wales, where Labour are the governing party, all funding routes lead to Westminster. So they moan about the Conservatives not giving them enough money to run Wales, but they've got a different set of rules for up north, up in Scotland, where the same thing applies, but miraculously the fault doesn't lie with the devolved Parliament. Well, it doesn't sit with the funder down in Westminster, it sits with the individuals who are in the Parliament. And that is, it's a deceit. It's a deceit, and it's to paint the Scottish Parliament in a poor light, as far as I'm concerned.
So if I'm sitting at home and I'm watching this, right, and I'm not involved in politics, and
You'd be one of the few.
I'm not even interested in the subject matter. The way I would look at this is as soon as I see a Labour group within a local authority, I would immediately imagine that that's the Labour Party. Everything is all managed, controlled by a senior hierarchy, and that's the way it works. Is that the way it works in North Lanarkshire?
You probably need to speak to the leader of the council on that one, but I mean, I suppose one of the recent examples, when you talk about that, and I need to be careful on the basis that there was a very recent major contract award. And we'll maybe go on to it in other days, but effectively that's there. And in effect, what happened with that, and it was publicised in the press, is that the leader of Scottish Labour actually came and spoke to the leader of our council to get a deal sorted over the basis of community closures that were proposed by the local Labour group.
Oh, that's the ACC review.
And all of a sudden, it came from Labour Party, Scottish Labour Party headquarters. And there was a quote of them about banging their heads together to get something fixed. And so
Oh, this was for the Hamilton and Rutherglen by-election.
this was around that time.
It wasn't back. It was right on that time.
So, but when you ask the questions that come from it, I think that's a question obviously for those within the Labour Party, but the perception of when you look at the circumstances around that particular example is that people need to be aware as to what happened in the involvement from their HQ.
I think we could potentially do an entire episode on that.
Well, it's interference in local government.
Well, no, again, there was interference in local government, and there was the use of the press to do that, because having terrified the individuals who were employed or who used the 39 active and creative community facilities that were destined for closure. And on the day of the vote for the Hamilton Rutherglen by-election, Councillor Jim Logue, leader of the...
Are we allowed to say that?
I don't think
Are
so.
we allowed to say that?
The leader of the Labour administration made a public announcement on, and I heard it on Radio Clyde, before anything was discussed with councillors. It was a decision that had been made at committee, as I understand it. Councillor Jim Logue made an announcement that there was going to be a U-turn and those 39 facilities were going to stay open.
Just in your defence, I'll put a public disclaimer just now. Jim Logue is a member of North Lanarkshire Council. He's got a prominent public profile. I think we're pretty safe to mention his name, just to make sure that we're
Breaching any rules
I don't
anywhere.
think we are. I mean, effectively, Jim is council leader, and he happens to be attached to the Labour Party. I don't really care whether he's attached to the Tory Party or whatever.
Well,
He's council leader.
This nicely segues into the next subject matter then that we're going to have a discussion about, and you made the point at that full council meeting once. And by the way, in fairness, I think I have to highlight the SNP and how they handled OK through gritted teeth, but how they handled that position when he came back by presenting false information. It was quickly picked up within the SNP ranks that the information being presented was inaccurate. Now, personally speaking, I don't think they'll progress anything with that, because ultimately you've got the leader of the council presenting inaccurate information to members. Goodness me, that is shocking for whatever gain that was. I don't believe it was just a mistake. However, if the SNP
It was a wider issue as well, though, Greg, because you're right, SNP picked it up very quickly, so hats off on the basis of whether, and for people maybe at home as well, motion is really just a proposal or an idea that somebody's putting forward. An amendment is just that, an amendment to that initial proposal. So, and even entering the chamber a couple of years ago, you've got to get your head round about that, and some members still don't get it, I think. But they picked it up very quickly. But the bigger question from that came from last Thursday was the basis of how can an amendment that's been put forward by a political group that was proven to be inaccurate be accepted for debate and discussion and voting upon within council? Now, surely there has to be an accuracy about the information that you're putting forward for other members to vote on.
You're jumping into episode 4.
I could well be, but there was so much come out of that council meeting.
Yeah.
And it is maybe one for another day. But again,
the discussion, I think that again, how motions are decided, how motions are presented, why the administration has to put forward amendments to every motion. These things, goodness me, they're in charge. They're the ones that are deciding on agendas and various other things.
We can explain all of that in detail, and I think people will genuinely be interested in that, because the full council will always include motions and amendments, because they effectively change how the business of the council is organised and managed. So it's really important.
But the question that I would have is, and this is homework for you because it will be a discussion point at a later date, is there a point to the administration? Is there a point to the administration submitting motions? Is there a point to the administration submitting amendments? Because ultimately, what is the purpose of that? They're only trying to quash any sort of democratic process. Their argument will be, no, we're trying to bring it in a budgetary term, and this is how you operate a council. But if you look at North Lanarkshire since its establishment, it's been under Labour rule. OK, granted, there was a couple of months where the SNP, before any committee started, before any real full council process started, it was in recess. So really, in effect, given that last episode, where we are now, is there a point to submitting motions? And as I said, that will be something I want you to think about, because we will be coming back for that discussion.
I wanted to get back to the whole thing about the financial predicament, right? And I know you were going to go into that.
sorry, I just cut across him.
No, it's not like you. It's not like you, David. But the issue around the finances is fundamental, right? Because if you're legally bound to produce a balanced budget, and you need to figure out where your money's going, right? So last year, financial year 23-24, at the beginning of the year, an amount was allocated to North Lanarkshire Council from the Scottish Government, and it was about £768 million, right? And that's for revenue services. That's to run the schools, pay the wages, fix the roads, cut the grass, look after cemeteries, all of that kind of stuff. But at the end of the year, after decisions had been made elsewhere, so decisions down in England at Westminster, where the government down there decided they were going to spend more money on devolved issues like health or education or policing or whatever it was, we get a consequential for that. So for every £100 that is decided to be spent down in England, we'll get a population share of that, which is 8%. So over it's additional money. So over the year, we ended up getting an additional £45 million. So we started off with 768, but we ended up with close to 814 million. So that's a sizable chunk of cash. And that's where the mini budget, I think, has a really important place to play, and it's something that we should be giving careful consideration to. There's an argument that we do the budgetary process way too early in the year. We can do the rental charges and we can do the council tax charges early in the year, but the budget...
Do you think the budget, when we set our budget in February, is by design? Do you think we're deliberately setting a budget before the Scottish Government budget comes out? Because then that way, really, if you look at it, we can present the doomsday scenario. Do you think that's the intention?
If I would never accuse anybody of doing that, and I know that you're not doing that either. I know you're throwing it out as a question.
People I speak to always ask that question. Why would you not align these budget processes so that you were fully aware of what your sort of finances were going to be?
It doesn't make sense to me to do it at a point in the year where you know the least amount what you're likely to have. So from my perspective, having a budget in June, for example, by the time you hit June, you'll know more about your allocation than you would at February, and that allows you to plan better, because the Scottish budget's gone through, and you know some of the consequences will already have kicked in. So to me, it makes no sense to do it in February. Does it lend itself to politicising the budget, and does it give a hammer for people to hit the Scottish Government over the head with? Absolutely.
So you come on nicely again to another segue that we have here, and when we're talking about the full council, we kind of covered school transport in relation to the budget. No really touched upon the sort of outcomes of it, but we'll come back to that. But you made a critical point during that debate, Jerry, that I wanted to touch on, and the SNP jumped on it afterwards. Was the point of PFI? Now, firstly, what is PFI?
In short, Jerry, I've heard you speak about this.
It's a con, right? In short, it's a con. PFI was started by the Tories under John Major just before the 97 election, when Brown and Blair came in, and it was carried on and enhanced to the nth degree by New Labour, who wanted to present, mostly to Tories down in England, that they could run a country and make sure that public spending stayed tightly, almost in line the way Tories would, so that Labour could get Tory votes down in England, right? So this mechanism was created, the Public Finance Initiative, or PPP. And basically it means that you borrow money from private investors to build important public infrastructure like schools and hospitals, and the costs for it magically don't go into the public spending balance book. So it looks as if Labour are running a fiscally tight ship, public spending is low, and everybody's seeing these new schools and community centres and hospitals all cropping up everywhere. But the rub on that is that while it doesn't show in the balance book, there's a mortgage attached to it, okay? So over the life of that asset, that school, that, just say a school was built in 2005, right? You pay a mortgage to a private organisation to design and build that structure, that school, and they will manage it. They'll do all the maintenance in it, and they'll do all the upkeep of it, and you'll pay for it. And then at the end
How am I paying for it? Is it coming out your council
it's
tax?
coming out your revenue, it's coming out your council revenue budget.
Oh, it's coming out the council revenue.
It comes out the revenue
So is
budget.
that your council tax?
So partly your council tax, but partly it comes out of that £768 million that you get at the beginning of the year.
It's coming out your settlement then?
It comes out your settlement every year. So last year, North Lanarkshire Council paid around about £38 million in loan repayments for PFI schools that were built in the early 2000s.
And they're still paying that?
They're still paying it. And you need to put that into the context then of the deficit that the finance officer said that we have over the next 3 years. The deficit over the next 3 years, in an optimistic outlook, is about £61 million. Next year alone, their PFI payment is going to be 38.2 million.
38.2.
The year after that, it's going to be 39 million. The year after that, it's going to be over 40 million.
When does that finish? So, I really don't know the timescales.
So most of these loans and repayments will run until about 2035, 2036.
2035.
So we have. So rather than spending money from public spending, we pretended that we were keeping public spending under control. We mortgaged the next generation of taxpayers to pay for these PFI, and all the way through, private lenders are making big money. And there's been a few very reputable organisations have costed what it would cost to build a new school, for example, right? If a PFI school costs £100 million, if you were to have built that through public spending, it would have cost 20 million.
What, 5 times?
5 times. So it's 5 times more expensive to use PFI than it would be using normal lending through our capital budget process. But it allowed Labour to say we are the party of fiscal prudence. That was his word. That was Brown's words. Fiscal prudence. He'd done away with boom and bust. All he actually did was bury it. He buried it in the early 2000s, and now we're paying for it, David.
So does the asset then fall within North Lanarkshire's estates, though? So at the end of this horrific period, do we own the asset?
We will own the asset at the end of it, but we will have paid 5 times more than the asset is worth.
And at the end of that, I'm guessing over that length of period, is that the repair costs must be horrific for the council then to take on.
So potentially, but as the school gets older, so you're not paying in the first few years a lot of money out other than just the loan, right, for the design and build. But see, as that asset gets older and you've got to replace windows and doors and roofs, that's when the cost comes in, and that's where they make the money on it.
Give us an example then, what that cost looks like. Do you have any examples of that? Because I know you have looked into this in a bit of detail.
Do you know, I don't want to give the exact figure on this, right, because but I coach, as you know, I coach youth football in North Lanarkshire and use the facilities.
That's what most has-beens do, is it not?
No, they do what most has-beens, but I was never a was-been to be a has-beens, so there you go. Some of those facilities are managed not by the council, so if a repair needs to be made to the football pitches, for example, or to goalposts, the council can't go in and fix them because it's governed by a management contract, and they set their own schedule of rates. So they come in and do the repairs and charge whatever the hell they like.
So it's set by them. Their schedule of rates is set by them.
That's my understanding. And the one that I use, when the football field surface was replaced and new goalposts were required. So you've got the 2 main goals at either end of the park, and then the pitch is split into thirds for training, and we 7-a-side goals. So you've got 6 goals, you've got 3 on either side, and you've got the 2 big goals. The costs for that were in the tens of thousands of pounds for goalposts.
What would the cost normally be? A couple of thousand?
Maybe a fifth of that.
Maybe a fifth of that, but it's a demonstration of the lack of control that you have, and
It's a prevalent point then, PFI. So funnily enough,
We're in debt, Greg,
Yeah,
because
well, listen.
we've not got enough money to pay our PFI. See, if we weren't paying the PFI payments over the next 3 years, we would have a surplus.
Well, I was going to say, how does that relate to the budget deficits? Because the 2 years that I've been involved in, Greg's been involved a lot longer, is that every time you sit in a budget or a pre-budget meeting, you come out and it's just depressing because you've got to save another 20 million, another 30 million, another 35 million.
Yeah.
And every time they say that, effectively, we're really talking about services. We're talking about people's lives, we're talking about grass cutting, we're talking about cemeteries, we're talking about schools, we're talking about all sorts of stuff. So,
School transport. Yeah.
school transport. So how does that relate though to the likes of the PFI cost? So we've got this cost, and that's just one cost. So how did that?
Let's just round it up then, right? School transport costs, just say 4 million right, a year to run. We're paying 40 million a year in PFI repayments. So it's 10 times.
Right.
They're now.
Do you think the wider public in North Lanarkshire either A knows anything about this or B cares enough about it? Do you think there's just an apathy there?
Well, I think, I don't know whether we're going to go into general election stuff today or not, but I think there's an apathy.
The reason I'm going on to it is, funnily enough,
I think they would care about it if they knew about it. If they understood it, they would care about it.
I had the chance to jump out to Tannockside yesterday, and I met with a couple of folk and asked them a couple of questions in relation to their knowledge on what PFI is. So we're just going to cut away. We'll look at these wee box clips, and then we'll come back.
Ideal.
Well, my understanding of PFI was the Labour government introduced all this cash, supposedly to keep the schools up and running, get them all updated, building new schools, all the rest of it. And now the money's just seemed to have been squandered.
Do you know how much?
It's, I don't know, hundreds of millions of pounds. And we appear to be paying out just in interest charges month in, month out, and nothing's getting done about upgrading schools.
Next one's school transport. You're obviously aware of the school transport stuff that's been ongoing in the press.
I've not really been following it, to be fair, but again, there's lack of cash in education in general, and maybe if the PFI had been there, there might have been extra cash to spend.
Have you ever heard anything at all about PFI before?
No.
No. If I was to tell you that this council currently pays about 30 odd million pounds per year in a PFI debt that will not be serviced until about 2050, what would your thoughts be of that?
Well, I'd wonder if we were paying for it or not.
You are paying for it. It's coming straight out of your council tax payment, and when you see your streets, your grass and everything else not being cut, that's one of the key reasons it's not being cut. What would you think? What would you like to say about that?
Well, I'd like to understand it or be more visible to see where the money's coming from and what we're losing out on.
Have you ever heard anything at all about the PFI debt in North Lanarkshire?
No, not at all.
If I was to tell you that there's a debt roughly of about 30 odd million pounds per year, and it will go up with interest per year, it will not be reserviced until another 10, 20 years, how would that make you feel, considering you know that they're not cutting grass, we're not looking after the elderly, etc.?
I think that would probably be quite an issue, I would think, really, considering that in the estate that I live in, there are tenants who pay money every month just out of the goodness of their heart to keep the grass areas tidy and well maintained.
Well, have I told you that the money that pays the PFI debt comes from your council tax?
No, that's something I didn't know.
In relation to school transport, have you heard anything at all about the school transport issue in the area? Have you had any thoughts
no,
or views?
I haven't, because my children are not at school anymore. So.
Well, listen, perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks. Tell me if you know anything at all about PFI debt.
I don't know.
What if I was to tell you that North Lanarkshire Council currently spends about 30 to 40 million pounds a year on a debt to private businesses that own the schools within this authority?
That's poor. Doesn't sound good at all.
So, very interesting to see views, and those eagle-eyed who spot continuity errors out there might have noticed that there's a few donuts away there. We shot away, Mr. Brennan. I'm glad you managed to clean your lips because it was covered in chocolate a moment ago.
They're about as colourful as your shirt.
So on those clips, I think it's very interesting. Randomly 4 people and that was who was interviewed. Again, obviously, the contentious issue of PFI, not many people know about it, I think it's safe to say about that, but also in relation to school transport, I think that unless you've got kids that are at high school or kids that are at primary school utilising that service, then it's not really going to be something that you're au fait with. I think that, don't get me wrong, I'm not detracting away from what the parents and the parents campaign that's been done. I think that they've done an absolute sterling job at bringing that issue to the public fore. But again, if we go back to 2017, it was sort of similar back then. I was involved heavily in campaigns back then when the administration tried to reduce the miles again, or extend the miles, and it was to move it up to the 2 miles and the 3 miles at that point. And again, I just think that this is a never-ending cycle in relation to school transport. We're seeing it year on year. We erode it, and eventually we take it away. And I'm sure there's a number of clips out there of previous full councils and committees, etc., where contributions have been made for the elected members that are making that point. Any comments on the aspect of what these people think?
Just one, and it's the fundamental one, is the cost. As the PFI cost increases year on year, then the savings that need to be made to the revenue budget will too increase in line with it. And that increase looks as if it's going to be a 3% increase year on year. So next year, you're, as I said, you're talking about 40, 25, 26, 38 million, 26, 27, 39, 27, 28, 40, and then it goes up 3% each year after that. So every year, we're going to be making these savings to school transport, to Club 365. We've reduced it from 18 to 12, and now we've done away with it. That was supposed to be an absolute game changer in North Lanarkshire, and every time I looked on the council's website, at one point there was always a smiling convener of education talking about the benefits of this radical change dreamed up by Labour in North Lanarkshire, supported by Scottish Government, to provide the 365 Club to make sure that kids weren't starving, especially through the school holidays. And now it's gone. This game-changing programme is gone.
The numbers are absolutely significant. Let's be honest with you. As a society, we become used to big numbers. You know, you look in the media and it's like, you know, the UK is in 1.3 trillion a debt or whatever it is, and it's, you know, multi-million pound deals here, there and everywhere. But when you actually break that down, 39, 38, whatever million it is, for a local authority and the services that then impinges upon is absolutely vital. And people probably need to correlate this. And just, sorry, I know it's an aside, but it's like, when we spoke earlier, we were talking about 3 or 4 million in terms of the costs that was involved in the school transport issue that's specifically there. Just recently, and it's maybe one that will come on to in a later date because it's currently being looked at by different authorities, but North Lanarkshire Council awarded £4.1 million, 4.1 million in external professional fees to external companies to back up the proposal of a procurement award. Now, that more than covers, you know, when we're putting it apples to apples. There's £4 million that has gone into the pocket of professional companies, and we are paying, on average, £2.1 million in salaries to the most prominent people within our council that have the legal expertise, the financial procurement expertise, all of this stuff. And yet, North Lanarkshire spend 4.1 million in external bodies. And that to me is just a stark comparison that's there. So you can argue that it might well have been done and everything else, but as a comparison, I think it was you, Jerry, that said the Scottish Government spent 134,000 on the latest independent referendum paper to consider independence. And I'm not promoting one way or the other. I'm just using that as a figure and as a comparison.
Yeah, there we go. For something as vast as the independence of a nation, when you put that into contrast,
it's just a context.
Put it into contrast with the Mears procurement project, or the enterprise project that we've just gone through. We paid one consultant nearly £250,000 for one report.
So I think that's a deep dive at a
Yeah,
later
one
episode.
report.
A later episode. I think. So let's round it up now. Let's we could be, goodness me, if anybody's still there and they've not finished that bottle of Blue Nun or cheap other alternatives. My goodness. Listen to us free ramble on and ramble on. So and coming for self-aggrandising. I love that. So political highlight of the week. That's where we're at now. What has been your political highlight of the week? I've got a few, by the way.
Well, I was going to say I've got a couple, but the one that I think, and because of the personal story I told earlier about the public gallery and everything else that's there, I think to me it was the good folks that took the time, they've organised themselves over the school transport, and it was just the voice and the dissent and the absolute passion and concern that was within these voices raised for the gallery. And that to me was what it, because it was real people making real points about real concerns, and the flip side of that was unfortunately the Labour side of that chamber and people cheering. It just didn't sit comfortably with me whatsoever. So for what it's worth, the good people that are fighting that fight against school transport, I absolutely hope that your campaign continues, because to me that's what a wee bit of local democracy is about, and they should be heard an awful lot longer.
I think that's a brilliant point that you've just brought up. And there was an article in the Herald yesterday, I think, where in one of those safe walking, deemed to be safe walking routes, there was some children injured. So
Goodness.
This is happening real time. It's happening now.
I think the part of that if I remember it, and it's only a couple of days, so I only scanned it, Jerry, but you're right. But I think the point was that the residents were saying that they'd only been told months before that was a safe walking route. And then the incidents of the kind of accidents and bits and pieces came to light in North Lanarkshire, from what I can make out, and again, need to be checked. But North Lanarkshire basically said that it's okay, it's still safe, because the accidents happened out with the times that kids would be walking. I'm thinking, sorry, that's not an explanation. If that is the actual defence, then sorry. I wish the school transport parents very well.
That's bizarre. What's your political moment of the week?
Mine's is a funny one. Mine goes down to the fundamentals of the chamber and who makes decisions and who doesn't make decisions. Well, why?
Are we going there?
So you made the point there about...
Thanks very much for joining us. This is the last podcast that we'll be making for a while.
David made the point there about Labour councillors, clapping and cheering when they found out that the video cast, the webcast, was going to be hidden from public view until the 4th of July after the votes. It was bizarre and opportunistic and all the rest of it, and it just showed all the negative sides of the chamber, right? But the issue for me was that it was an unelected member of the chamber who made the categorical and independent decision that the webcast was going to be withheld. It didn't go to a vote. It didn't. Monitoring officer just said we're in the interests of ensuring that there was no political advantage given to one candidate or another. It was going to be withheld until the 4th of July. But that never happened. It wasn't withheld. So the statement was made, by the monitoring officer. And then we asked some questions about it to say, wait a minute, we need to understand why this is happening. And then, lo and behold, the decision's overturned by, I don't know, and the footage
is... Do you think it was the general public who overturned the decision, or do you think it was a political decision about how silly it was to withhold that? Because there was no political damage.
You can never hide that type of discourse from the public.
You know how difficult it is. Sometimes you're in the chamber and there's a lot of things happening, you don't pick up on the small comments and bits and pieces and who said what, because you're maybe concentrating on all that or preparing your own bits and pieces. But that's interesting, because I hadn't actually picked up that it was a monitor officer that had said that, because what I had picked up was the other side, was that the provost at that point kept saying to people as they were speaking, about not making political comment because we were in the pre-election.
Tom Johnston and he's now Don Rising.
Actually, you're right. It was, and a couple of speakers were actually stopped to say, I bring you back to the point that the monitor officer, as you said, has made about politics. And I thought, where does that relationship sit? Sorry,
it comes down to the fundamentals. Who actually makes those decisions?
Yeah.
And why are those decisions made? Should it always be that those decisions can only be made by elected members whose chamber it is? I mean, we're elected to sit in there and be the scrutiny body.
Well, that is a very valid political point. Yes, I have many, but I have one in particular. When the minors motion was being presented, obviously my SNP colleagues in their ego eyes highlighted straight away it was a double negative. And really, in effect, whether or not that should have been allowed.
Explain that.
So basically, within it, the proposition coming for the amendment, did it change it sufficiently to sit in its own and sit in its own right? Because really, in effect, what that amendment did was highlight the fact that we don't want that. We don't. That's it. Just drop this, shut this down. Yeah. That's basically it. So there was nothing counterproductive coming.
What was your motion? What did your motion?
I think it was five. It was five points to the motion. The 5 points were: one, that we formally recognise as a local authority the profound historical moment that was the miners' strike. Yeah. We pay tribute to that by putting up or erecting or whatever it may be a permanent memorial within the authority that we can recognise that the miners' strike happened and the sort of hardship that every one of these men, their families, their communities, every single person experienced. So we've got a shared memorial. In addition to that, also educational events, because I think it's important that as we move on, right, coal mining is not a critical industry in this country anymore. No. But again, there's a big aspect to that. Why should we forget? So if we look at educational aspects, they're saying, look, this was the impact of the miners' strike. This is what it had. I'm sure many people in the authority's family or something like that, you could throw a stone and we would come across some family member that was involved in mining. So really, in effect, it was about making sure that heritage was preserved. And last but not least, lighting the civic centre, right, to remind not only those people in the authority that the miners' strike happened, but also to remind our Labour colleagues of their socialist values, because I think Herabrand McVeigh raised that this is about solidarity. That's the critical point to it. So again, it's about solidarity. So my political moment was the fact that we got a motion through, first and foremost, which is a wee bit unusual for that council. But the second part of that is it was backed by everybody. And I appreciate that some of those uncomfortable truths were not good for people and wish to interrupt all the way through my contribution. But the other political moment for me within that as well, when it was highlighted, I don't blame Conservatives for being Conservatives, when they continue to maintain key positions within this administration and under the payroll of the leader.
That's evidential.
Under the payroll of the leader. Yeah. So for me, I thought that point being made was critical. Thank goodness I didn't go into the rest of my speech, because potentially I think I could have lost the room. So really, in effect, I think that would have been my political moment, but not to detract away from the impassioned pleas coming from parents, not to detract away from the other important issues.
I think they all stand on their own merit. Let's be perfectly honest. And it's, I just thought, this has been useful, but I hope it's been as useful with residents that has been anything else.
Well, I'm sure I'm sure those two members of the public that have watched this and potentially are subscribing or were a political opponents who are
both my sons said they'll watch it.
eagerly watching this. Regardless, I think that the fact that we've got individuals who are in their position and in a position where they're kind of in the know, to be perfectly honest, wanting to explain things a bit better, then I think it's a start of discourse which has been missing for so long.
I have to make one comment though, right?
On you go.
And it's for other individuals who will be watching this, not necessarily members of the public. This cannot be misconstrued for anything other than what it is. Yeah. This is our way of interpreting and communicating with people in North Lanarkshire and beyond about how things work in council, and it's not about identifying individuals for
certainly
for ill treatment, and it cannot be misconstrued by that, because I would hate to be in a position where we sit here and we have an honest chat, and then the next thing you've got an ethical standards complaint coming in the back of that.
Well, again, to answer that point, and obviously we're coming to the end of this, but I think that for the electorate's position, again, coming as a resident in North Lanarkshire, now I'm involved in politics, that's the bottom line, you're involved in politics, so we freely know how things work and how things are designed, and really in effect all we're doing is having a discussion where people can listen into that process.
That's where I'm coming from.
And that's my viewpoint. I'm sure that's yours, David.
Totally sure.
And on that note, thank you very much for joining us. We hope you've found this as entertaining as we have for the most self-aggrandising elected officials in North Lanarkshire. Although we are not acting as elected officials, we're acting as residents.
Indeed.
And our position remains. But again, thank you very much. We will be back again in a fortnight's time.
We will
And on that, I think we'll do a deep dive into how motions work, how things round about the council work, and just talking about the political balance that exists within North Lanarkshire, I think. And whatever other news we
2
get.
weeks is a long time in politics, Greg.
It's
So
a
God
very
knows what
long
we're going
time.
to speak about next week. But
What is the point?
what's the point?
What's the point? Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.